Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin, and I'm joined today by my co-host Sim. On today's show, we have the honor of welcoming back Dr. Jonathan Brown, aka Jack. Jack, welcome back to the Mad Mamluks. Always a pleasure to have you on. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, and kind of maybe just a little bit late, Eid Mubarak.
Oh, yeah, Eid Mubarak to you as well. So I understand you just got back from Turkey. I know we were talking via email, trying to schedule the show. And what were you doing up there? And how long were you there for?
I was in Turkey actually for about a month because, well, first of all, my wife's parents live there, so we were going for our kid, visit her family and our kids, see their grandparents and everything. And so then I also taught at this summer school in Bosnia. So I went for a few days to Sarajevo and taught there. That's the Triple IT summer school in Sarajevo, which I recommend people go. If they live in Europe, then you can go to that. It's very good. And then I taught at this Hasan program in Istanbul, which is the first year they've run. It's run by some young Turkish students who studied in the U.S. or are still studying in the U.S., some of them. And it was great. It was excellent. They brought some terrific teachers, including myself, and they had really good students, and they were from all over the world. And I thought it was a terrific experience. And then, for the rest of the time, hung out with my wife's family and ate a lot of food.
Sure. Now, do you speak Turkish?
Not very well. I speak. I can read a little bit better than I speak. Turkish is a hard language. Whoa, it's hard. I mean, I've learned my minor in college was Russian. I learned Latin, Arabic, and Persian, and Turkish blows all of them away. It's really hard. It's like a mind. It is a mind knot. I should say it's really tough.
Right.
But reading it is easier, especially Old Turkish, because it's like mostly Arabic and Persian.
Yeah.
Then oddly enough, despite the fact I spent a lot of time there, my Turkish is getting worse, which is really weird. I don't understand how that happens. I think I'm just becoming one of these Americans who expects everyone to understand them when they go abroad, just speaking English.
Yeah. Well, me and my wife were thinking about visiting Turkey, but we can't decide on how long we need to go. Any recommendations on first-timers visiting Turkey? And
depends if you just want to go to Istanbul, if you want to go to other places. I mean, you can spend easily a week just in Istanbul seeing stuff, and then you could spend 2 weeks would be probably a good amount if you want to go to Istanbul and then a few other cities.
Gotcha. I mean, do you go every year to see your in-laws?
Yeah, I go to Turkey a lot. I'm going to go in 2 weeks, and then I'm going to go in a month after that, inshallah. So I go to Turkey anywhere from 3 to at least 3 times a year, probably.
Sure.
Just for various things, to conferences, things like that.
I do want to ask you, I saw somebody, one of my friends on Facebook had posted something where Erdogan was talking about the plight of the Rohingya Muslims, and he was like, Erdogan is the Khalifa. Obviously, a lot of people...
I don't know about that. I think we have some low standards for being a Khalifa.
I mean, look, it's great that he... It's great that he highlighted this plight that a lot of people are silent. Although it seems like in the last couple of days, there's been a lot more, vocal concern about their plight, and a lot of people calling out the Burmese government, or the Myanmar government, for what they're allowing to happen and stuff. So, it's great. Anytime there's a Muslim leader who even has a shadow of a conscience, it's an improvement.
Well, it just bothers me. I love Erdogan in terms of the positive steps he's taken in accepting Islam as a part of society in Turkey, in a secular Turkey. But, this is one of the largest armies in the world, and they certainly have the capability of sending ships over there and not necessarily going to war with Burma, but at least sending a message, in a way to the Burmese government that, hey, cut it out. There are consequences to genocide, essentially, right? So it just kind of bothers me that, I remember during the Intifada of the late 90s, early 2000s, right before 9/11, I remember one of the Gulf countries sending a truckload of slingshots to the Palestinians, and I'm like, well, that's such a pathetic attempt. But then I saw Muslims like, rejoicing about it, saying that, this is such a great thing that the Gulf countries are doing, sending slingshots to the Palestinians. And I'm like, I mean, these are countries with militaries and weapons, and I don't know. To me, it just
Well, I mean, the problem is that it's not just a small thing to go and send forces to another country. I mean, there's issues of sovereignty, and there's any country that did that would just face tremendous opposition. Not necessarily because people support what the targeted country is doing, but because it's just such a big deal for a country to involve itself militarily in another country's sovereign affairs. I mean, that's a big deal. And it would be,
But America does it all the time, though, and everyone says, okay, well.
Usually it would do so under some umbrella of a UN resolution or something. And, and things like when Donald Trump launched those missiles at Syria, I mean, that's like a really problematic action, because you're in theory, you're launching attacks at a sovereign country.
Yeah.
And that's not a small thing. I mean, just the idea that the country can go to war with another, can invade or use force against another country to protect the rights of that country's inhabitants. That's a, kind of a mid to late 20th century idea that really goes against the way that countries and states have thought about sovereignty for centuries, because it's a big, if someone says I can intervene in your affairs because I don't like the way you're treating people, then that, you can imagine, if you that just opens a box to any country that can interfering in any country that it wants to.
But I mean, there's exceptions, right? Like this is genocide. I mean, we're not talking about any type of dealings that they're having with their citizens and how they're governing their citizens in terms of taxes and social issues that might be occurring. But we're talking about genocide that's happening.
Yeah, that's true. But, and again, I'm not advocating anything. I'm just trying to bring up different perspectives.
Right.
Which is that, there's sort of one school of international relations. I'm not an expert on this, but I think I'm right about this. The realist school, which is, represented by people like John Mearsheimer at University of Chicago, who argue that basically that this kind of moral or humanitarian use of force overseas is not desirable and shouldn't be done, because it never ends up working. I mean, it ends up, you can, in the movies you go and, you can save the day of some group of civilians and they're grateful. But in reality, what that ends up happening is, I mean, look at the U.S., bombing against ISIS in Syria. I mean, they've killed, I think, now over 700 people, under civilians. This is just this week. I read in The Economist, something like 700 civilians have been killed. I mean, it gets to the point where, if you're bombing Iraq and Syria to try and kill ISIS and you're killing 700,000 people, things like that, then imagine that's the low number. Imagine it's like around maybe 2,000 more accurately. Imagine that. I mean, you're getting close to the number of people that ISIS kills in terms of ISIS killing civilians. Like, I'm not exactly sure how many people ISIS kills in terms of civilians, but I mean, it's probably not orders of magnitude higher than that. And so if the attempt to help is causing as much destruction, or, even a large portion of the amount of destruction that you're trying to prevent, then it begs the question if it's really worthwhile. And it's hard to say, well, we should sit put while genocide occurs, but the realist school would say that this isn't going to end well. Whatever intentions you have, it's not going to end well. So, you want to go help the people in Libya with fighting against Gaddafi. Well, it's not going to end well, because now look what happened. And you can never predict these things. You can never control the outcome. So it's better just not to add fuel to the fire. So that's one approach. Of course, the other approach is to say, look, there's some situations in which such a massive injustice is being done, such a clear moral wrong is being perpetrated, that anybody with the capacity to help out should. And that's, probably what you're feeling.
Right.
It's understandable, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's just low standards and, so being so easily pacified. I remember just recently with Trump launching those airstrikes on those Syrian air bases that were cleared off before anyone even from the Russian side got hurt. And there were people ready to accept Trump into their household. Muslim families, they were like, okay, I'm going to name my son Donald J. Trump. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's such low standards we have. But I think we're just so desperate too, as well. I mean, I'm not blind to that fact as well.
I mean, yeah, I think that was unfortunate. I mean, I think that just goes to show how kind of desperate the, pro-Syrian rebel, pro-Syrian resistance lobbyists were in this country. And I say that, I say that out of sympathy for them. I think that they had been trying really hard to get the U.S. to get involved militarily, whether it's through a no-fly zone, whether it's through more assistance to rebel groups, but the government under the Obama administration had been so reticent to offer that kind of assistance and support that when the president did anything, it was just like, they were elated. So.
Yeah.
Sure. So one of the things we were talking offline before we got started was, you're a tenured professor now, right?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So mashallah. So, so you seem to be somebody who always does engage in a lot of back and forth on social media, and whatnot. What's your approach to that? Why do you, a lot of people would say well, we don't understand why Jack always plays in the mud. Why do you do that? Is that something? Is a hobby?
You've been talking to all my relatives or something? No,
no.
No, there's fairly strong consensus amongst my family members that I should not do this kind of stuff, and I love and respect. I love them and respect their opinions.
Well, their fear for you is that you're going to get caught in saying something that you shouldn't, and
I think that's not. I don't know if that's so much their fear. I think it's more that, and look, this is justifiable, which is they say, they say this is beneath you. You write books and you write articles and why are you wasting your time? Going back and forth with these people who are just like trolls or just not serious people or just some kind of propagandist or something like that. So why do you bother with this? And it's just wasting your time, and it demeans you. They say it demeans your standing, and I think they have a point.
Yeah.
In the sense that I think that there's really limited value in kind of the slogging out mud wrestling stuff that you see on, Facebook or Twitter. I mean, I don't do Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but I was on Twitter. I mean, when I first joined Twitter, I just was astounded by, it's like a toilet. I mean, it's like the sewer. I mean, Facebook is like a realm of enlightened beings compared to Twitter. Twitter is just garbage. And I mean, that was just it was her. I mean, my wife immediately said, you cannot send any tweets without my permission. And she basically took them. She I can't remember what she did. She should change my password or something. I don't even know if I could send tweets. So I just tweet things that are, if I write something or if I publish something, I tweet about that. Or sometimes I want to share an article or something. But I mean, with Twitter, I realize this is just, has no benefit. I mean, it's just a super.
I'll just share my experience with you, because I started off with when we started the Mad Mamluks handle on Twitter, we had 0 followers, and we saw the way how well-known people on Twitter were, their model of gaining followers and gaining any kind of following was to basically spew random thoughts that were going through their head throughout the day, retweeting and random thought. Anything that was just crossed their mind, they're just tweeting it out.
Yeah.
And that's literally the formula to gain followers. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I can't do this. I can't be that guy who follows this kind of formula. We're just gonna let it happen naturally. Have our episodes be tweeted out every once in a while. Some of our guests tweets, we'll retweet those on our handle, and just slowly and surely we're at 2,500 or something right now. I don't care. I see people who have 25 to 30,000 followers, and I've never heard of them in my life, and they act like they're celebrities, you know.
Yeah, some guy who like opening up toys to show kids, like,
right?
You know, different
Hey,
Legos.
Sim, can we talk about your one tweet that you deleted?
Oh man, you really want to open up that can of worms?
Sure, why not?
Must have been really bad.
I went after Rabia Chaudhry, man.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh, hey. Yeah, you know, I have to say, I have great esteem for Rabia Chaudhry, and I have affection for her, and agree with her on one specific thing, and I probably disagree with her on some CVE things, but she's a fellow Muslim American trying to do what she thinks is right, and I extend her greetings.
Yeah,
what I said was.
Can we make some context? Let's make some context, because I think Sim and I were originally interested in bringing her on Mad Mamluks to talk about the Serial podcast, which I enjoy. I don't know, Jack, have you listened to Serial?
I'm the only person I know who'd never listened to it.
Yeah. Not
because I have anything against it. I just didn't have time, and everybody around me was obsessed with it.
Yeah.
But it was just.
Well, Sim thinks that Adnan's guilty, right?
Yeah. But so I'm an ardent Adnan is guilty. You have to be honest. I don't believe in the theory of the unluckiest guy in the world argument. You know, when a lot of managers at restaurants or in the retail industry will know, there'll be always that one employee who will always call in sick, and this happened to me, and then my dog died, and all these ridiculous excuses for them not to show up to work. And is it possible all those events happened? Sure, it's within the realm of possibility. I mean, it's definitely possible, but the likelihood is that you're a liar and you're just probably lazy and you didn't show up. So it's that those are, if I can make some kind of parallel to Adnan Syed's story, it is just a series of unbelievable mishaps that have happened for him not to have killed this woman. I mean, and well, the reason why I went after Rabia was that she said something about the sister who was killed in
Adam Center. Remember in Ramadan?
Yeah, and she sent out her condolences to it, and I'm like, wait a second, you're defending a murderer here, and you're literally trying to get this guy off the hook for killing someone else's daughter, brutally murdering her. It was like, wasn't it strangulation and whatever?
Something like that, yeah.
But anyway, when you're in that kind of line of work where you're trying to get a murderer off the hook of killing a similar age, a teenage daughter of someone, it's a bit rich that you're now sending your condolences to someone else's family. Yeah. It just, I would have understood, you don't have to always say everything on social media. Like, you could just keep it internal and make dua for that person, but using your platform in that respect, it just rubbed me the wrong way. I ended up deleting the comment because it wasn't representative of our whole team. We have 6-7 people in our team, and I didn't want to be the person that
some of them are Adnan's innocent people.
Well, I think so.
Yeah,
I think Adnan's innocent, but like Sim's always more of a skeptic than I am. I'm pretty gullible.
Well, here's what I did. Okay, I talked to a couple people about this, and we went through all the different facts of the case, and we really broke it down, and I explained to him, okay, after all this, do you really think that he's innocent? And they said, he's probably guilty, but he did his time, and now he's a hafiz, and we should he's our Muslim brother, and we should let him off the hook. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I can't believe you're saying that. This is you need to be an agent of truth. I mean, this, like, getting him off of a technicality because
he's a hafiz,
and he's repented, and you don't know that. He could be the biggest charlatan ever, So that's my theory, at least.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, let me tell you what knowing nothing about this, let me tell you what I think. No, just, that was a joke. I thought it was pretty funny, but anyway, you guys didn't laugh. You're lost. Basically, knowing nothing about this, let me speculate. Look, I am just so, having seen the way that prosecutors manipulate. Prosecutors will say the worst stuff about people, and they know they can't prove it, and they just throw everything against the person and see what sticks. And, and I think, I have such skepticism about the way in which criminal justice system is abused in this country, especially against minorities, that I am sort of just default skeptical of any accusation against somebody. And, if there's a chance that they were innocent and that evidence was that the system was manipulated and then overpowered them and things like that, I'm highly inclined to give that to give it a real hearing. I don't, as I said, I don't know any of the details of this case, right. So I have no idea. Maybe,
I will say this much, that his lawyer was completely
inept.
Yeah.
And that's, and I think it's very, it's very dangerous. And it's funny, I get in this debate with my wife all the time about, certain people who are, accused of things. And I really strongly believe, innocent until proven guilty is a principle that is, you have to apply it for everybody all the time. It doesn't matter how much you don't like them. It doesn't matter how horrible you think they are. You might think they're awful. You might never, you might want to condemn them, but people are innocent until they're proven guilty. And that it's easy to do if you like somebody. It's easy to do if it looks like they're innocent. But when it matters is when it looks like they're guilty. That's when you really have to insist on this principle and never fail in us applying it and calling for it to be applied.
Yeah, I went with the reasonable.
I was convicted, so I have no different situation, obviously.
I'm saying I'm not saying he's innocent in that 100%. I'm just saying that I didn't feel like there was enough evidence. There was reasonable doubt, kind of like the OJ case. I still believe OJ is innocent too.
Oh my God, no!
I just don't. I don't.
You lost all credibility now.
I don't know. I just I haven't revisited the case, but I watched a documentary.
How are you on the whole 9/11 thing?
Oh my God!
I'm just joking.
No.
Okay.
Oh, the Saudis did it.
About that. I think we should not talk about this issue. Obviously, none of us.
Wait, you brought an interesting point, though. Did you? There's so many Muslims still in our. I won't say a majority. I don't think it's a majority, but you hear it enough that there's a lot of people who still don't believe that it was Muslims who orchestrated or planned it from the top down. I think a lot of people now are saying that Muslims probably have done it, but the United States government looked the other way.
I don't. A couple of years ago, I remember Chris Hayes. I think it was on Bill Maher. A couple of years ago, Chris Hayes had this. It was probably in 2012 or 2013. Some new evidence had come out about how, the U.S. government had known about some intelligence, and I think this was just kind of confirming what had already been pretty obvious, which is that different intelligence agencies and different law enforcement agencies in the U.S. had all the pieces of the puzzle, and just people hadn't connected the dots. And so what's ironic is that, the government asked for all these powers of surveillance, of law enforcement, of prosecution, of ability to access evidence, present evidence in the wake of the attack. But that in fact, the government had never lacked capacity. It just lacked, the ability to synthesize information. And, so all these laws, the Patriot Act and all these other things have been passed, and, people's lives have been changed by them. And our notion of privacy, our notion of security has been changed probably irreversibly. But that in fact, none of that was necessary. It was just someone basically screwed up, and that was it. And it just happened to be a bad screw up. So, I tend to think more along those lines, not to get so obsessed with who did it, because, if if the people who were supposedly did it didn't do it, I mean, how the heck are we how am I gonna know that? What am I gonna do? Like sit there and watch videos and
that
like,
Tower 7 though, man.
This is just
Tower 7. That was
to think that somehow you or I are going to be able to access information that would lead us to a conclusion that would be other than the official one. I just am so skeptical of that. So I'm basically agnostic about all this stuff just because it's, what possible evidence are we going to have that would overcome the official story? I mean, how would we know?
Yeah. And,
I think wrapping up the whole point about that tweet, it was in Ramadan the last 10 nights. Thankfully, it was an even night, but he ruined my tarawih that night. Because I don't know. I think you sent us I made the mistake of checking my phone between like 4 rak'ah.
Yeah.
And then I think you sent us a screenshot of it. And then, like, within 15 minutes, my phone started blowing up.
Oh my God, yeah.
And so, like, I had to leave.
This was our first Twitter drama or social media drama that we really caused. So everyone's, like, phone's buzzing.
I don't think she even read it.
What year was this?
This past Ramadan.
This past Ramadan.
Okay, wait, the one that just happened?
Yeah.
So the one, like...
Yeah, because it was right after the number of murder, right? The whole...
okay, yeah. I forgot about that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you guys handle it, man. I don't know how you guys keep on like dealing with controversies after controversy because you're like a veteran of this. This was my first time, and I'm like, whoa, mommy, help me. I know we have some friends on social media that like are ardent supporters of the Mad Mamluks, but they always tell us you guys don't double down enough. If you take a stand, don't like back off and be like nice. Just double down more. What's your take on that's part of the social media culture? That's kind of what Trump did to get that's his whole mantra.
It kind of depends. So I think it really depends on what your, sort of what your like profession is or what your place in life is. So one of the things about being a professor that's tough is, I'm not complaining. It's a great job. It's the only thing I would be able to do. And I'm very grateful and fortunate. But is that you're held to a really high standard in terms of, because if I write something that's inaccurate, I will never hear the end of that. Like if you're a journalist, you write something inaccurate, whatever, you write so much, people just move on, they don't care. If you're a professor and you make even small mistakes, people will it really will start detracting from your credibility. So you have to be very careful about what you write, just in terms of its accuracy. And, then, you're also expected, whether or not this is a correct expectation, but you're expected to kind of have a more mature posture to not engage in really kind of dirty, nasty name calling and stuff like that. And so I think that kind of that really puts some restrictions on the way you can act in social media. And I think so. Some of the stuff you see online is just so dirty, and that's not the ever kind of stuff I would ever get involved in. For me, I try to make it about the issues, not about people. And so, even for when we talked once about the MLI thing, like, maybe once or twice I've gotten sucked into saying something personal about somebody, but I think that almost everything I do is just talking about the issue. Like, this is the issue. This is the issue. It's not about people. It's not about the individual, or nothing against the individuals. I have a specific problem with this decision or this action or this policy or this program. So, I think that if you try and stay on the issues, then, you'll stay clean of some of the dirtier aspects of what social media dogfighting can become.
Well, you're no stranger to the recent controversy from,
how recent?
I'm talking about like 4 or 5 months ago. I think there was.
Yeah. That was unpleasant.
Yeah. Well, tell us about a little bit about it. What happened? Because it seemed like something serious was going down in terms of people just really going after your workplace. And I saw that again, going back to Rabia Chaudhry again. She was doing the same thing where she was like tweeting not just at you, Jonathan Brown, but also at your workplace, like somehow it seems like it's the way that we approach any type of discussion is that, hey, you really want to say this? Well, let's include your workplace as well in this discussion,
Yeah, it's like first move is try to get someone fired, Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I would not try to, I don't think, I would never try and get someone fired. I think that would be, it wouldn't occur to me as, what is that really going to accomplish? I mean, you're going to hurt somebody and deprive them of their livelihood. And I'm not really sure how that would be, especially another Muslim. I mean, why would you want to do that? It's just kind of par for the course. It's just sort of, when you mentioned call-out culture, which I wrote a blog post about, and I actually think there's a lot, I sort of support a lot of elements of call-out culture. So I'm not, sort of a diehard critic of it. I think a lot of us, I think it's a way of actually, achieving and affecting change in a system that has been really, hostile to change on issues like race and social justice. So I think it has a lot of benefits, but I think one of the bad sides about it is that it's only worked because it's really a slash and burn approach. Basically like some rich white guy is not going to change anything unless you really go after him.
Yeah.
And that's true. Like that's actually accurate. So, I understand that. But the problem is once people get kind of inured into that approach to things, then everything is just immediately like, guns blazing. We get in this dude, get the person fired, get in this dude. This person's a monster, right? So you go from 0 to 100, and you kind of pull out all the stops immediately. And I think that's, you lose the capacity to engage in reasoned discussion, to try and convince people privately, or to try and, try and have them as your ally and not necessarily as your target.
Yeah.
Do you think there are exceptions though? Like, I know I don't have a position on this, but I just want to get your take. Like after Charlottesville, a lot of folks started like finding pictures of the people who were at the protests on Friday night.
Yeah.
And then calling them out and reporting to their employers, and people were getting fired. Yeah. And people were like, I'm not really that racist.
One of the guys was identified by his tattoos.
Yeah.
And they sent his picture to his workplace and he got fired. So
one guy though, unfortunately,
I want to be clear. I'm not saying that it's never right to do that.
Right.
I'm just saying that, if you're, so let's just, I wouldn't let's say I disagree with, let's say I really disagree with, a Muslim who's saying something about, American foreign policy or something. I'm not going to try and get that person fired. I'm not sure why what is that going to accomplish other than, I'm not going to, I'm just going to probably create sympathy for that person and sympathy for their position, and I'm going to look like a jerk and a victimizer. And so, I think, if someone is like at a Nazi rally and they're chanting, all sorts of horrible racist Nazi slogans or something, then yeah, they probably, that they should be accountable for that speech, and their employer should know about who they are. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
But I think that, again, as I said, that, call-out culture, let's just call it call-out culture, right? It doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of, various movements for social justice and civil rights that, achieved change and had an impact because they realized that you can't be really just polite and sort of engage in this politics of respectability. You have to make people feel pain or they're not going to change and they're not going to take action. And, unless you show a company, for example, that their positions they take are actually going to end up affecting their bottom line, they're not going to change their policies. Yeah. So you have to, make it hurt. And it's terrible because, it's awful to inflict pain or whatever. We're talking obviously metaphorically here. But it's been shown time and time again that in the United States, at least, this is one of the only ways this is the way you affect change, especially amongst the powerful. And so, and the elite. And so I completely understand that. But the problem, as I said, is that once and that it might be actually a good tactic to use with people, these guys who go to the Charlottesville protests and they think that they can just go and have these noxious views and no one's ever going to know about it. No one's ever going to pay a price and they're never going to pay a price, right? And then it might be a good thing to show them that's not the case. And if you want to go and have these Nazi views, then that's fine, but you better realize that you're going to have to show your face in public. But, that doesn't mean that this should be done for every disagreement between people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know personally, I don't worry about somebody reporting me to my company HR for anything I say on Mad Mamluks.
The thing is that 2-3 years ago, social justice was seen as something righteous,
Right.
I never heard of anything negative about it.
Yeah.
Nobody made fun of it, but now everyone's making fun of it. Like social justice warrior, it's now a pejorative term now because.
Well, I mean, but you have to, I'd say that's sort of a false course or a false course you've charted in your mind, right? What I mean by that is that, that's like saying, 5 years ago, nobody was critical of this person, and now this person's really famous, and now people are critical of them. Okay, but I mean, of course, people are going to become critical of somebody when their person is better known, and when that person is starting to have an impact. Suddenly, there are people who don't like that impact, or there are people who are jealous, or there are people who are just vindictive, right? So, I would try and obviously there's a lot of criticism of. So let's just say social justice warriors. I know that's a pejorative term, but let's just use that term, right? There's a lot of criticism and that comes from the people that are targeted by those social justice warriors, right? So if you're, if you're the man, right? You're like the rich white guy who, makes his money off, minorities.
The owner of the Clippers, for example.
Yeah, okay. I don't know anything about sports, but that was that guy, right?
Yeah, everyone knows
if you're like the man, right? If you're the man, obviously you're going to be critical of social justice activists. Yeah. And if anybody who supports that person is going to be. That doesn't mean that criticism is valid. So I think you have to distinguish between criticism that is sparked by, or that comes from parties who are losing standing or things like that. Versus criticism that is either from other people of the same kind of place on the political spectrum as these social justice activists, or some people who share their concerns and share their objectives but disagree with some of their tactics, right? So those are different kinds of criticisms. And I think that a lot of the criticism you see is from people who don't want those kind of changes to occur. But also, and look, some of it is people who are, think that sometimes it can go too far, right? So, I mean, I'm a white Muslim, and I mean, I remember I got in a dispute, a private dispute, a few months ago or weeks ago, I can't remember how long ago, about, someone had written an article about how white Muslims can't be victims of Islamophobia. And I said, this is nonsense. Of course, white Muslims can be victims of Islamophobia. I've been a victim of Islamophobia. And, yes, white people have a huge amount of privilege in the United States. Yes, I walk down the street and no one bothers me. Yes, I walk down the street and I get treated well. Yes, the police don't bother me. Of course, all these things are true. And yes, there's a power dynamic in this country. And yes, of course. But, I'm also a Muslim, and there's no reason to tell me I'm not a real Muslim by saying I can't suffer as other Muslims suffer, because I can, and I have. And, there's that creates antagonism, or that antagonizes me unnecessarily. Just say, you probably get treated really well. You could be a victim of Islamophobia, but you probably won't get it as much as a black Muslim or a brown Muslim. And I say of course that's true. But I think sometimes the, social justice ethos is too extreme, and that also obviously upsets people. Yeah,
and that's what I meant. I think I was talking about the trajectory that has happened with social justice over the course of the years, as a lot of social justice activists who saw that this is an effective tool, they kind of took it up another notch, and they're like, okay, well, forget about violence and calling out people who are doing, acting out violently in public and, going after their jobs. Well, why can't we just take them to task about stuff that they say, and now you're really just shutting down their arguments. And I feel like a lot of this alt-right and the whole rise of Trump can be attributed to how the left really shut down discussion and discourse and really shut out a lot of the right, at least the people who are, in the interest of furthering discussion and trying to find common ground. They kind of shut them out of the argument, and they're like, you know what, you don't even belong here. I remember, I don't know if you watch Monday Night Football. I know you said you don't watch sports, but I remember when the right-wing commentator
Bruce Miller? Not Bruce Miller, Dennis Miller.
Dennis Miller.
Yeah.
When he joined that team, I remember everyone was so upset that, this right-wing guy is joining. And it was a sports program. This is Monday Night Football, and people were so upset that this guy joined the broadcast booth.
I think that's true. That you can have, even look, I'm not trying to act like I'm an important person or something, but I'll tell you what my view is, right? So I am very, very, very supportive of free speech, right? So at a university, I think that pretty much anybody should be able to come and speak at a university. I mean, there's a difference between, I don't think anyone should be invited to get give a commencement speech, because that's an honor, right? So certain kinds of speeches they connote, or they clearly indicate approval or respect. And so obviously that should only be done for people who deserve it. But in terms of just allowing voices to be heard, I believe basically any voice should be heard. Any view should be allowed, because it's only by hearing voices and hearing people's views that you can understand them and evaluate them, and you have this marketplace, free market of ideas where people can understand and kind of better approximation of truth. So I completely agree with you, and I think that this sort of I don't approve of this no platforming approach. I think that there are certain platforms, for example, at universities, which I think are spaces where people are supposed to be able to communicate, and you can't communicate effectively and honestly if you don't allow all the voices at the table. So I think, I believe that this sort of no platforming approach should not be taken at universities, and I don't support it at my university.
Yeah. Yeah. This in fact really just created like silos and echo chambers that really what Trump fed off of. He went to those echo chambers at the Blaze and at Breitbart, and he said, here's where all these guys gathered up because mainstream media won't accept them. So he just got them as his base, and won the election essentially. Sure. Right.
I want to go back to Jack. You were talking a little bit ago. I have to dig into this a little bit because our listeners will eat our lunch if we don't ask. We have had some recent podcasts that have gotten pretty controversial. Unfortunately, those co-hosts are not on this show. Morton Mogo, we're here to clean up your mess. But so we had a recent show. We talked about victimhood and things of privilege and whatnot, right? You mentioned your own privilege as a white American male. And then you mentioned the term being a victim as far as Islamophobia goes. Have you ever felt, and it's funny because this past week, I think our last show, I think the concept of white privilege came up, and some of my co-hosts, I'll reiterate their points. They don't believe it's a thing. White privilege is a fake thing, and they say it's actually better to be a black person in America now than it is a white person because, for example, things like affirmative action. And so I was on the hunt this past week looking for a white nationalist Muslim. I couldn't find anyone who actually was sane. I found one guy, but he seemed off his rocker, and I ended up I think I had blocked them on my phone.
Yeah. I was so upset
you gotta be careful.
I was so upset at him even approaching white converts and talking to him about that. I'm like, Ryan, what are you doing? People are going to think that we're nuts. Well, we are nuts, but
yeah. Well, so it's one brother I know. He's a good brother. He's in law school here in one of the local Chicago schools, right? And I'm like, yeah, you're at so school, but don't you think if you were black, you could have gotten Stanford or Harvard, but now you're here? You know what I mean? Just on your same credentials, and he didn't want to answer it. And so that's, because one of the comments one of my co-hosts made on the last show was, don't try not to laugh. But he said, if I was a white person and I saw what affirmative action does, I would also be a white supremacist. Now my co-host is Indian. I'd like you to comment on some of these things as a white person, just to I think we have to talk about it without, since it kind of came up. I can't just let it go.
Yeah, it's tough for me to talk about because I don't I'm not, I've never been not white. I mean, have you guys ever seen Naked Gun 33 and a Third? There's a really funny scene in there about this guy who's like, he's like, prison changes you. He's like, oh yeah, how? He's like, I used to be white. Anyway, that was really funny.
The famous scene, the shower scene where his towel drops and he's wearing his steel underwear.
I love Naked Gun movies. They're so funny. So basically, I mean, it's, if you talk to me like 5 or 6 years ago, I think I really would have been saying, things like white privileges. This is just stuff that's made up and people who are upset and it's not real and it's exaggerated. And I think that, oddly enough, I think it was getting married to my wife and learning really kind of firsthand how her family had suffered at the hands of government accusations and prosecution, and seeing really just firsthand how power works, what it means to be at the business end of the U.S. government. I mean, the U.S. Justice Department, just to feel that power. I mean, to see that power and the injustice that it can create. I mean, they can destroy lives even though they know someone's innocent. They'll destroy their life just by bankrupting them and ruining them just by accusations that they don't even ever have to prove, So I think that's when I realized that I had been spared all of this. That there was all this injustice going on around me and that I had just been spared it because I was a, wealthy, highly educated, white guy, who lived in a certain place in certain social circles and also happens to be, very attractive. So basically this was like, I had, and so I think that it was really kind of starting to see the world through the lens of my wife and her family that really shook me and then made me realize that all this stuff was real, And so, and then, you have to ask yourself a question, which is, what are you going to do to fix this? What are you going to do to address structural inequity? And another thing that happened, just again, like, it's sort of funny how stupid I feel, but whatever. People can think I'm stupid, I guess. But it was really when my mother died, God rest her soul, she died in 2010, that I understood what inherited wealth and privilege means, right? So, my various parts of my family some of them came in the 1650s, some of them came in the 1700s, some of them came in the late 1800s to the United States, or even before the United States existed. And, they were able to accumulate a lot of wealth and social capital and education and actual capital and all these things on the backs of slave labor and on the backs of expropriated land. And that I grew up, I was fed by this. I was educated by this accumulation of wealth and privilege. And it was, when my mother died and, her estate was shared, was given out to her heirs, right? I learned what it meant to inherit something, right? I saw what that gave me the capacity to do. And then I realized, it sounds stupid that I took this for me to realize it, but it just was sort of so clear to me, this is what it means to inherit privilege and wealth.
Sure.
And if you don't have this, then you're just, I'm always going to be ahead of the other guy because of this. And, I never took out loans for college. My parents sent me to private school my whole life. I never took out a loan to go to college. I didn't have to do work study in college. I did do some work, but I didn't have to, right? I didn't, I never suffered as other people suffer. And that's, I'm not saying that a lot of white people don't suffer, but I just, you have to recognize the reality of what people whose families were never enslaved or whose families were never deprived of their land and their property and their lives, right? and subjected to genocide and stuck in reservations. I mean, if you haven't suffered these things and your family and your ancestors haven't suffered these things, then you are going to have a tremendous advantage over the people who have, right? Yeah. And then the question is, well, how do you fix that? And, you know, again, like if you talk to me like 5 or 6 years ago, you know, before I got married and said, you know, what do you think about reparations for slavery? I would have said something like, well, you know, it's not mine. I mean, it's too bad. It happened. Obviously, it's a tragedy and injustice, but you know, I'm not responsible. I didn't do anything. Why should I suffer? But, you know, it was actually, for me, it was really the Israel-Palestine conflict that made me realize how blind I was being to this issue. Because, you know, if someone asked me, do you think, you know, Israelis should have to pay reparations for Palestinians? I'd say, of course they should. But then, okay, what's the difference? I mean, if someone's born in Israel, you know, in the same year I was born, 1977, okay, they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't take anybody's land, probably, right? They're just a person who's born there, and they might be a perfectly nice person, just person, someone who's actually concerned about the plight of the Palestinians. But the fact is, I would still think that they would be responsible for paying back what had been done to these other people, because they had grown and been watered by this expropriated wealth and this injustice. And so how am I any different? Then I realized, you know, well, I mean, then I actually started saying, reparations, I'm not exactly sure how they would be paid, but I mean, you know, my official position is I think that, you know, white families in the United States, or families that benefited from slave labor or even from a racist system, should have to leave a portion of their estate to, let's say, like some kind of charity or some kind of body that distributes this to, you know, to African Americans, to Native Americans. I think that, I mean, I just don't, I don't see how I can not say that, considering what I think justice is, you know, and so, you know, I intend a portion of my estate, inshallah, you know, will go to, some of these charities. And, you know, that's that's what I'll try and do. But so this whole thing about the guy I'd be a white supremacist if I was to lose my place at the university. But the fact is that what are you going to, you know, eventually you can't, how do you make up for centuries of enslavement, intentional deprivation from the resources of education and skill building? How do you make up for that other than just by putting people, you know, giving people an opportunity that they might not deserve? I mean, that's the only way you can do it. And it sucks to be the white guy who loses the place at Harvard, but, you know, our society has to try and rectify these iniquities. I mean, they have to be rectified.
What was your family background as far as like your family history, as far as like what kind of businesses were they in?
Well, the funny thing is my family was, the only family I know of that came to America in the 1600s and like never made any big bucks. Which is really weird. You know, they were, so some of them, it depends. I mean, some of them, basically my grandfather, my dad's father, became very wealthy because he was just a really good businessman. He was in the publishing and newspaper industry and radio station owning. So he got very wealthy. But he was like, you know, like a really mellow guy. I mean, I don't even know if he graduated college. He was from near Cleveland, Ohio, and he was. But I mean, so that's how he made his dough. And then my dad, God rest his soul, he died last year. He worked for the World Bank his whole career, and so, you know, made a good amount of money, and he invested a lot of money, and he inherited a lot of money, and so that, you know, built on that.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you think that the privilege, we had Imam Sohaib Webb on 4 or 5 months ago, and Imam Sohaib's family, I think his ancestors actually owned slaves. You know, and but like when I hear your story or Imam, I was like, there's probably, if I understood your point correctly, you're saying that even like the poor farmer or coal miner in West Virginia has some level of privilege because his ancestors were never enslaved, and the privilege ranges. Like you and Imam Sohaib probably have more than the coal miner in West Virginia, but that coal miner in West Virginia, even the poorest white person around, still has some level of it. Is that what is that more or less the point?
Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm not trying to like win in the woke Olympics or something like that. I'm not, very few people would sit around and say, "Oh, Jonathan Brown, he's so woke." I mean, I'm not. I'm sure that a lot of people are always, unhappy with what I say. But these are the things I believe. So I think that, yes, because that coal miner, I mean, is mining on land that was expropriated from Native Americans, that was taken from people who were almost certainly not compensated and might even have been removed violently or even fatally from that land. And that's something. That is getting free land or getting massively subsidized land, and the opportunity to work it and exploit it is not nothing. And that's something significant.
Okay.
My mom's family came from the South. They came from Texas, and they definitely owned slaves. And they, my great grandfather fought in the Civil War on the southern side in Texas. And, my great grandfather on my father's side fought on the northern side, so maybe that compensates for that. But so they had slaves. I've seen the records. I've seen like the photocopies of the documents.
Yeah.
And so, even someone who is like this poor farmer, yeah, they benefited not necessarily maybe from slavery, but they benefited from expropriated land.
Right, but does this whole notion of privilege, does that disqualify you from talking about issues that are relevant to the African American community?
I think you guys have, this is sort of maybe this is the issue of contention. I think this is where it can go too far because look, I mean, I'm not going to sit around. I mean, since I began public speaking as a Muslim, which was like 2006 or something, 2007. I mean, one of the things I've consistently called for is for leadership and the American Muslim community to be ceded to African Americans. There's probably recordings of me saying this, and I believe this is very important because, first of all, because Muslims in this country are marginalized or dismissed or targeted because we're seen as foreign, and African American Muslims are not foreign. So we can avoid that. And second, because, when Muslims sit around and are critical of American domestic or foreign policy, we get called traitors or we become suspect. Whereas an African American, like, Dr. Sherman Jackson, for example, Dr. Sherman Jackson wants to talk about the injustice of American history. No one can question his opinion. You're gonna tell him he can't complain about what white people have done. Of course he can. What the American government has done. Of course he can. So African American Muslims give the Muslim community they are leaders who are shielded in a lot of ways from the liabilities that the immigrant Muslim community has. And I think that's really important. So I've been calling for this for a long time. But that doesn't mean that other Muslims, white Muslims, immigrant Muslims, have no role, of course. And so, I'm not, if there is going to be a panel about race issues, I shouldn't be on the panel because I don't know anything about this stuff. I mean, I don't know about what it's like to be a minority. I don't know about what it's like to be discriminated against racially. So I'm not going to, why would it be ridiculous for my voice to be heard? But, if there are other issues, that are important, why should a white Muslim why should their opinion not matter? I mean, their opinion should matter just like anyone else's. I mean, yeah. So I think that, this stuff can go overboard where, like if you're saying white Muslims can't be victims of Islamophobia, of course they can. Or white Muslims can't understand what it's like to be Muslim in America, really. Well, that's not accurate. And finally, I mean, just what you talked about in terms of issues that concern the African American community. I mean, you might be referring to the slavery issue. When I talked about when I wrote this article about slavery and gave this lecture, I mean, I wasn't talking about slavery in the United States. I mean, I mentioned it sort of marginally. I was talking about slavery in the Islamic civilization. And,
right.
And I mean, I'm not an expert on slavery in the United States at all. I mean, nor am I going to make, comments about it. I mean, I think in the lecture and in my paper, I just said that it was a horrible, dehumanizing institution that was, example of the absolute domination of one human being or another, which is completely wrong. In Islam, it's completely wrong, I think, morally, universally. But, but I don't, so I mean, I'm not, but I mean, in terms of slavery in Islam, well, I mean, I can talk about that because I'm a Muslim and it matters to me and this is an important issue. And if someone else doesn't think I should talk about that, then they can talk about it. But no one else, why did I write this article about slavery? I wrote this article about slavery because other people are not writing this stuff.
Right.
Other people are not writing this. And somebody's got to do it.
And I think what a lot of people did was they equated the American implementation of slavery or what Islamic history understanding of slavery, and I think those two implementations were quite contrast, right? I mean, they were implemented so differently. At least from my understanding of American history, slavery was so much more brutal over here than it was in Islamic history.
I mean, I think, well, first of all, I actually don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
no, I'll tell you why. Because it is not. I decided that people cannot have really reasoned discussions about this.
Yeah.
Currently, and I tried to do that, and I was like pretty viciously attacked.
Yeah.
And I just don't. I mean, I'll write about it, but I'm not going to talk about it because I don't trust the integrity of the people who would attack me to not just take half of a sentence and then leave the rest of the sentence and just brutalize me. But I mean, I would just say, just to answer that one question, because this is a historical question, right? So there's sort of a debate amongst scholars of slavery in world history, right? Which is sort of American slavery a different category from slavery in Islamic civilization? I mean, was slavery in Islamic civilization sort of a lighter version of slavery in the Americas? And I think that was for a long time an opinion held by historians, and it was problematized and qualified by scholars who came and pointed out that, well, sometimes in Islamic civilization, slavery was as bad as it was in the Americas. So then you're kind of left with a question, which is, okay, well, generally, was it as bad? And I think, in my opinion, based on my readings, Islamic civilization is, of course, vast, right? It's vast geographically, it's vast chronologically. So you're talking about, even making a generalization about something in Islamic civilization is very tricky, let alone comparing it to something else.
Yeah.
But I would say that, in general, and of course there are exceptions to this, in general, I think that slavery in Islamic civilization was not as severe as it was in the North American colonies, and elsewhere in South America and the Caribbean. That doesn't mean that it wasn't sometimes as bad. Maybe it was even sometimes worse. But generally, I think that it was not as severe. Now, someone can say, "Oh, you're an apologist for slavery." No, I'm not. That's not. At no point have I said anything. I just said that X was not as severe as Y. Okay, that's a historical.
They're both bad.
That's a historical judgment. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah. So, I mean, anybody who wants to sit around and say something awful about me at this point, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, is engaged in malicious slander.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that, that's one of the issues. I'm writing now another article about this for Yaqeen, which will hopefully come out. I'm not done with it yet, but hopefully I'll be done with it soon. And it will be looking at a lot more of these issues.
Oh, so you are, exploring this issue more. Okay.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, because I was worried that they shut you up and okay, that'll be the end of this discussion.
No way. This is an important issue, man. This is an important issue.
I think what he was alluding to was he didn't want like an audio clip cut and paste.
I see.
You know what I mean? Because that's where, versus. Oh, it's funny that
No, what do you mean? Oh, so when I said I don't want to talk about
right,
it,
right.
Oh yeah, so I mean I don't want to talk about it, like in the sense I don't want to actually have a out loud oral conversation about it.
Cool.
Because I mean I only want to write about it because writing you can really control what you say. I mean no one criticized the article I wrote, honestly.
That's true.
They just criticized like 15 minutes of Q&A that I had with the audience after I had read this hour-long article. So, and when you're doing Q&A, I mean, unless you're like a diplomat, in which case you're never going to say anything interesting or accurate or, helpful. If you're a scholar, then you're trying to answer questions as best you could using the things that come into your mind. And, you obviously are trying to phrase things properly and accurately and sensitively, but sometimes, it's hard to have the level of discipline that you would have when you're writing something.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think, I've always, on Mad Mamluks, I'm known for kind of running my mouth and not having a filter on, but I don't post a lot on social media. And I'm always like, people have to sort through a 2-hour podcast to find a little clip of me saying something crazy.
Well,
and most people are too lazy to do that.
Look, there's people out there, there's whole armies of these Islamophobe people who do that. I mean, that's their job. I mean, I'm sure they're paid to do this. There's all these, there's this, different sites that are usually kind of written, by pro-Israel people, like this one called, I think, Canary Mission or something like that, Canary Coal Mine or Canary Mission or something. And they have, I saw they have a site. I mean, I was just like, they went through just like random lectures I gave in like weird places years ago. I mean, I didn't even know these lectures were recorded. I mean, they had gone through and picked out like half a line here. I mean, so look, if you become a target for Islamophobes, then they will do that. They will go through, because they have all this money and they'll pay some, douchebag to sit and do that.
Well, I noticed an uptick in our ratings just right after our recent episode with you entitled The Dimmies. And I'm like, well, I know Jack is well known, but seeing thousands and thousands of downloads from everywhere, I was like, wow, there's something going on here. And then obviously I think it just coincided with the controversy of that Q&A session as well. So there was
that around the same time? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was within a few weeks. I wouldn't say exactly
that. It was your guys' fault. It was your guys' fault.
No. There were no clips of ours.
Basically what I've noticed is that they won't go after everybody, right? So they basically, there's this kind of like a bar. Once you get to a certain level of influence, then they start attacking you.
Yeah.
And so, you can go for years saying whatever you want and nothing will happen. And then if you get big enough, then the hammer will come down on you.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because our stuff stays on the internet.
Yeah. Forever.
Unless the podcast is totally trash and we delete it.
Well, I mean, look, there's so many times where I have to make the editorial decision where I can, edit stuff that our co-hosts say. Especially, we have these things called roundtables where just a host talk and, let loose and just say what's on their mind. And that's what happened in our last episode, which kind of generated a lot of controversy and some people were really upset and offended by it. And I really apologize because that ultimately falls on me as the editor.
That was the white privilege stuff.
Yeah, that was the white privilege. It's if anyone wants to go back and listen to it, it's around the 30th minute mark. And again, I apologize for anyone getting upset and for any hurt feelings. What we are trying to do is spark conversation instead of shutting up people and not exploring, even no matter how dumb you feel like what Mort and Moga were saying. I want to explore that, and I don't want to shut people up just because it's not politically correct. I want people to be able to have discussions without feeling judged. Like, okay, just because some people don't find it, or some people will get their feelings hurt by it, that doesn't mean that we can't explore that and try to find the nuances and find some of the detail in those discussions. So I feel like there's a lot more to be discussed, and I feel like we can that discussion is not over with this episode. It's going to be an ongoing discussion that we're going to further explore with other community leaders that we've reached out to, and they've expressed interest in talking to us about it.
I think one of the criticisms that I found was valid on that show was we generally, none of us are experts, right?
Right.
You know, and we're talking about, we're not like, we're in IT or we're engineers. You know what I mean? And it's a lot of it is just talking out of our own perceptions. So on one side, I got a lot of messages saying that like, yo, I agree with Moga. Moga speaks from the heart, and there's a lot of Mogas out there.
Moga is our Somali host. He's we call him Moga because he's from Mogadishu. And people said, no, he's speaking out of privilege as well, or he's not allowed to talk about the African-American experience because he's not real African-American. So I felt like that was kind of unfair because he actually grew up in the ghettos of Kansas City. And he didn't say that on the podcast on that episode, but he did definitely grow up in the ghetto, and he grew up in a gang-infested
environment.
Well, yeah. When his family immigrated to this country, he was in war-torn Somalia, where his family was split up. His dad they didn't even know where his dad was, and his mom and other siblings were trapped in Somalia in refugee tents, and they had no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the people gotta understand that there's more to what meets the eye, you know, when you hear people talk that.
Right. I wish Mogo was on the show, but he always talks a lot about like he doesn't like how sometimes people abuse the concept of being a victim. Now, reality is there are victims.
Yeah.
Right. But like, if some people use it as a crutch where they can't, that prevents them from making progress. And I think that's his whole point, more or less than anything else. That his family, he felt like they could have been a victim, but they made a decision to, like, you know, essentially now, whether or not there are other circumstances that I'm not aware of that allow a Somali family to persevere where an African American family could not. That's something that I'm not necessarily aware of, but I think that's something that we have to, on roundtables, sometimes we have to like maybe just do better. Like I find that critique a little valid in the sense that like if we have like data now, at the same time, people want to say stuff like if one of the guys says, "Oh, white privilege doesn't exist," that's not an issue of Akida. It's not like you know, it's an issue that people can disagree with, but people have made it to the point where it's almost like saying that Allah is 3 or something, right? You know what I mean? So it's trying to find that balance, so to speak. But yeah, like Sim's right in the sense that we do sometimes.
We're in the business of entertainment as well, right?
Right.
I mean, we're not going to beat around the bush. The reason why our podcast has been so successful compared to others, and I'm not going to be humble about it, is because we try to make it entertaining, and sometimes entertainment becomes abrasive and. Unintentionally, it can hurt people's feelings, and that's on me. And sometimes I do my best to edit things out that can be said off the cuff and can be interpreted the wrong way. And we're learning as we go along, and we're in this journey with you, the listener, as well.
Look, you guys are courageous. I mean, what I mean by that is it takes guts to get on the air every week and talk to people. I mean, this is tough. I mean, I would be really, really, really terrified to do what you guys do.
I just think I'm an idiot. I just don't realize the severity of it, to be honest, Jack. Like you know what I mean?
Thank God for idiocy. Sometimes it can help, can be useful to the community. I mean, I think that, I agree with you guys. I mean, there have to be, these venues, and if you're not going to, if people aren't allowed to say what they think, then they're never going to be corrected. So I think this is, I said I'm very passionate about free speech, and I think that, if people can't say that they think, white privilege doesn't exist, I mean, then maybe, okay, if it does exist, then how are they ever going to be convinced? Someone has to tell them, okay, well, let me explain why it does exist, or let me, and if you can't have a discussion, then no one is going to be convinced of things they should be convinced of and give up beliefs that are wrong. So, I mean, you have to have these discussions. So I would never, I would always encourage you guys to continue, and don't beat yourselves up too much about these things.
I'll give her. I think we do try to like reach out to people who are gonna challenge. Like we have tried to reach out to people who will challenge our views. We don't want to live in like
echo chambers.
You know what I mean. And people don't believe that sometimes. But like one of the reasons this podcast got going is because I know Sim was a big fan of the Joe Rogan Experience,
right?
And he's always talking about Islam this and that, and there's never like like his version of a Muslim is like Majid Nawaz, on the show.
The whole his crew, his posse was Sam Harris, Majid Nawaz, Ayan Hersey. He loves those guys.
Dr. Krause.
And Dr. Krause, right? And so, and I would tweet out to Rogan, and I'm like, hey, bring this guy on, I would keep on doing this over and over again, and he wouldn't respond. So one day I was listening to the show, and he kind of called me out indirectly. He didn't say me, but he was trying to, he basically slapped some reality in my face, saying that, you know what, all you people trying to get my attention on Twitter, you guys got nothing better to do, but you don't do anything yourselves, and you sit around on your computer and you just that's your whole job, and I took that as truth, man, and that was like a slap in the face. But I'm like, you know what, he's right because if I really believe in what I'm saying in my discussions with him, or my one-sided discussions where I'm just kind of telling him one thing, and I'm like, hey, bring some Muslims on here. Maybe you can bring out guys that come to sources on your show, and he can explain to you what maybe a different side of the argument, and that really really resonated with me, and that's when I really sat down and thought about how we are going to launch our own podcast and be a vehicle for truth. And we're not going to get caught up in echo chambers. We're not going to be pigeonholed as a certain podcast highlighting only one specific perspective. So,
and I think a lot of I used to listen to the Rubin Report. I don't know if you've heard of them, Jack, Dave Rubin, but he always talks about free speech. And I'm like, he's full. And I was like, after a while, I was like, he's full of it. He's free speech on certain issues. When it comes to Islam, there's no free speech. And I was like, this is BS. So like, I would tweet him out. I think even some people tweeted Rubin to get you or Joe Bradford on the show specifically. He may have tagged you and stuff on Twitter.
They don't care. They're not agents of truth, man.
Yeah.
If people want to know the truth, they're not going to spin it their way. They're going to get every side on the table, and they're going to try to figure things out. They just want stuff spun their way because the left has gone a certain direction, and they've gotten super hard left, and they're going to go super hard right. And
the one thing I'll say is that, like, for example, like the Rubin Report. Like, I don't think we should expect him to be down with Islam. Like, at the same time, like, I don't think that we would bring on, like, we wouldn't be completely free speech. Like, we wouldn't, like, I don't know that we invite, like, I don't know what you think. Maybe, I don't know that I'd invite a Qadiani on the show unless we were going to troll him.
Oh, man.
Because I know that's the reason.
We're not even over this controversy yet. I'm not saying I wouldn't be open to it, but I would.
Yeah,
I want to take it step by step.
Like someone with some really deviant beliefs, or like someone who was like pro ISIS.
I grew up with Qasim Rashid when I was young.
Well,
so.
I mean, I think it depends. It really depends on what someone's intention is, right? So, I mean, I don't have a problem. I would never have a problem discussing anything with anybody, as long as I knew that they weren't trying to use that discussion to push a certain agenda, or they weren't trying to manipulate it, or they weren't going to leverage it. So, I mean, if someone wants, for example, if you wanted to have a Qadiani on to talk about what Ahmadis believe, try and discuss, have like a discussion about the controversies between them and other schools of, in Islam, that would be fine. That's from my perspective. I mean, I think what I don't like is when is the sort of doorstepping that happens, or someone comes and says, do you believe that Qadianis are Muslims? If you don't, then you're a takfiri, and you're a Sunni supremacist, and Sunni supremacism is what causes Islamophobia. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, first of all, what do you mean? You're calling me a takfiri because you know that this is going to get me in trouble with, mainstream public square in the United States. And so you're trying to use public, non-Muslim public suspicion of me as a to bully me into accepting you as a Muslim. Well, if you're going to accept you as a Muslim, it should be based on a discussion of your beliefs and my beliefs and whether or not they're compatible, right? Yeah. It's a theological discussion. It's not something you can bully someone into. And second, if you're saying that I'm a Sunni extremist, well, Shia also don't accept Qadianis as Muslims. And then if you're going to say Sunni extremism is the cause of Islamophobia, that's absolutely ridiculous. Okay. Bigotry is not caused by the discriminated against group. Bigotry is the problem of the bigoted person. Okay. It is always the problem of the bigoted person. And you can always, anti-black racists, it's not their fault because black community has these problems. That's nonsense. Every community has problems. Every community has, it doesn't mean that you can go and call for them to be expelled from the country or to be deprived of rights. So I think, that would be like how I would approach this issue of discussing something with the Qadiani or the Ahmadi issue is, what kind of discussion are you going to have? What kind of person are you going to have? I think one of the problems is that some of the Qadianis who are most well known in social media are these doorstepping guys, right? Who come to you and be like, do you accept me as a Muslim? If you don't, then you're a takfiri. Oh, well, okay, well, this isn't really a useful discussion.
Well, Jack, before we wrap up, what do you got going on in the next few months? Anything of note? I know you mentioned the paper you're writing for Yaqeen.
Yeah, I'm writing this one on, it's done. I just have to publish it. Well, there's one coming out about martyrdom. There's one coming out about, truth in other religions. That'll be probably controversial. And, then there'll be the one about, the moral problem of slavery. And then there'll be one about, slavery and abolition of slavery in Islamic civilization. Those two will come out probably later, like in a few months, inshallah. And, otherwise just keep writing. I'm still working. Last time we talked to you about this book on the history of Muslim courts. That's getting near done. Hopefully it'll get published. And then translating Sahih Bukhari, which is a never-ending task.
Yeah. What's your general day-to-day like? I'm just curious. Like, you're what? Have you hit 40 yet?
I just turned 40. I just turned 40 on August 9th was my birthday.
MashaAllah. Because I know you mentioned I said you were 10. You just got 10. You said you've been tenured for a while now.
Yeah, I got tenure when I was 32. I first got tenure at University of Washington, and then I gave that up and I came to Georgetown, and then I got tenure again at Georgetown.
Okay. I thought it always took like 10, 15 years to get tenure. I guess I was mistaken. Like, what does that entail?
No, well, in most places, once you get a tenure track job, you go up for tenure, I think, after your 6th year. I think that's pretty uniform, if I'm not mistaken. If you could go, that's why people don't get it. Sometimes they don't get it because you only have a certain amount of time. You can't just take forever to get what you need to become a tenured professor. So if you haven't done it in the 6 years, then it's called, up or out. Either you move up or you have 1 year and then you got to go.
Right. So right now you've got Yaqeen responsibilities. You're chair of the Muslim Christian Understanding Department.
Director of the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding.
Okay. Yeah. And then, are you teaching classes as well this semester?
Yeah, I teach class. I'm teaching a class now on History 109, Islamic World. Teaching that class.
Okay.
And next semester I'll teach 2 upper level classes.
So,
yeah.
Any insights on just like basic, like how you get all that done with the family and what? I'm always curious whenever
the productivity tips, man.
Yeah, man. I was like. Jack Brown didn't become Jack Brown like overnight. Like, there was a process, and it's always something I'm always interested in, like learning about and trying to like, pick brains and just trying to like implement things here and there that I can like maybe try out.
I mean, I think focus and discipline are really important. I mean, having, a lot of people have the talent and the time to do stuff, but they just get distracted and they do stuff like watch games, like, the game or whatever people do when they watch sports, the game, they watch sports, they just putz around. I'm always very focused and, I don't sleep that much. I stay up late. I work, when my kids are asleep and, And then another thing is to always, be building towards something. So, for example, I never read anything, or even if I hear something on the radio or I see something on TV and I immediately make a note of it. I mean, I have these notebooks that are just full of notes and notes and notes and notes and notes, where I saw something, where I read something. Exactly. So, a lot of times I think the reason people don't produce as much is because they're not able to kind of corral what they ingest into something that they can then produce. So I think you have to be really disciplined about always kind of constantly sucking in information towards a certain end.
Right. I think Muhammad Gilan and I were. You're familiar with Dr. Muhammad Gilan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know he's got a very systematic approach to it and whatnot. So your sports is basically Facebook debates, though.
No. I don't. I'm going to try and not get into Facebook debates. I think. I think that the stuff I care about. I wasn't really into Facebook. I got on Facebook when I got married because my wife was like, "You need to get on Facebook." So I went on Facebook, and I didn't even really use it until the summer of 2014, when two things happened. One was the ISIS, and the second was MLI. And I realized that the people who were doing it had this really big social media following, and that these were the role models that all these young Muslims were looking at. And I realized that, I need to get out there and try and provide a different view, and that I had to really cultivate this. And then the second thing is, when ISIS happened and seeing people getting confused by that, losing their faith by that, being tempted by their arguments. And so I really wanted to go and try and counter that. When over a year ago, when Sheikh Omar Suleiman came to me and said, hey, look, you write good stuff, but no one reads it because you're an academic. Let's team up and do this yaqeen thing. And then, you write the stuff, you cultivate research, and then we'll do all the social media, search engine optimization, things like that. I realized this was the way to do things. It's not, so I care about, social media. I care about Facebook in the sense I think it's a really useful way to reach people. And I think it's really, especially a lot of the, young Muslims I know on Facebook. I want to be there to encourage them, to help them clarify things when they're confused, to give them inspiration. That means a lot to me. But, I don't think so much is achieved by these sort of long drawn out slugging matches. I think when the MLI thing happened, that was, I don't know. I'm torn about whether or not, I don't know. I'm not sure if it was the right thing to do or worth it or not worth it. I think that the argument had to happen. I'm not sure what other kind of forum it could have happened in. And I think that it served to make people aware of something that was happening that they might not have been aware of otherwise. But I don't want to, I feel dirty. I don't know. Maybe some people say, "Oh, Jonathan Brown, he's an a-hole. Oh, Jonathan Brown, he's he's blah, blah, blah." I feel very, very dirty every time I engage in one of these things. I don't like to, to criticize people. I don't like to be criticized. It hurts, and I'd rather not have this be part of my life. It caused me a lot of stress.
Right.
Yeah. You're such a nice guy, man. I don't know how somebody could even say that about you. Criticize your ideas or whatever, but like some of the vitriol is just really.
Some people don't think I'm a nice guy. Some people think I'm, whatever.
Just because because you're against their idea doesn't mean that. People just take everything so personally now. You attacking or challenging their ideas has now become something integral to who you are. And the moment you challenge that a little bit, seems like you're challenging the foundations of who they are, and they're going to collapse on themselves.
So, I mean, I think that you have to, that tells you about the person, but it tells you about the position. I mean, in my experience, the issues you can't talk about, the third rail issues, are precisely the ones that expose truth, right? So how does a system preserve itself if it has weak points, right? You have to keep people away from the weak points. You have to keep people away from the hinges. You have to keep people away from the weak, the chinks in the armor, right? And so I can come up with a number of examples, but I know I don't want to, but I mean, because even mentioning them is problematic, in our society, that you can't talk about these things precisely because actually our reasoning for why we do this or why we don't do this is actually very flimsy in our society. And similarly with things like MLI, I mean, MLI was, a really bad program. It was a program that was openly had a very, had an insidious purpose and, being used to manipulate the Muslim community and lead it in a direction that was immoral and unjust. And it was so open. I mean, if you actually discussed it, it would be a losing case. So the only way to kind of prevent that is to make the discussion into, you have bad edeb, you're a nasty person, you're horrible, you're an extremist, whatever. So I mean, if people have, if people actually have strong positions, and maybe they have disagreements, but they at least have strong positions, then I think you actually have much more productive discussions because the two sides, or sometimes more than two sides, they're not so insecure that they're not going to be willing to engage in a kind of structured discussion.
Right. And a last thing I'll leave you with, I think a lot of people did benefit from your post though. I mean, I feel like people did, because at the end of the day, people are on Facebook, and to see someone with your pedigree coming up and taking a stand, I think for them that was really, gave them a lot of conviction and that they were on the right side, so I wouldn't, again, I know you told us earlier, don't beat us ourselves up. I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't do it either, but
yeah, man, because there's so few people who want to stick their neck out on anything these days.
Yeah.
Even our listeners, they'll private message us about how much they supported this episode, about something that challenged, something status on the left, or something, status quo stuff, and, they won't dare post it publicly, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, there's a lot of stuff that is just for example, I never get involved in Sunni Shiite stuff. I'm adamantly anti-sectarian. I mean, I refuse to ever get in that kind of debate because it's so destructive, and it is a poison that I never want to ingest or spread to anybody.
I kind of feel the same way.
I'll never get involved in like Salafi Sufi stuff because I am not going to one day on Facebook somehow find the argument that proves whether tawassul is valid or not. Right. I mean, that's not, it's not going to be me who does that. Right. So what's the point?
Yeah. I think you got the right approach. It sounds like you're just moving to what's going to be most effective for me.
Yeah, I mean, so there's certain things that I have. I mean, when I don't know if it's like giving away or whatever, like trade secret or something, but I mean, I really focus on specific things in social media. I don't just, sometimes I post stuff about like a movie, it's funny or something like that, but I mean, I focus on very specific issues. One is civil liberties. Two is criticizing foreign governments on specific, very clear moral issues, and on issues where the U.S. government and American citizens have a capacity to influence the situation, right?
Yeah.
And three is Islamophobia and trying to ameliorate ignorance about Islam and incorrect ideas about Islam. And four, the last one is Israel-Palestine issue. So these are the things these are the four things I talk about on Facebook. And I think if you look at anything I write, it will always have to do with one of these things. Even, recently I posted something about the Ahmadi issue. I don't talk about that qua of a theological issue. I'm not really qualified to do that. Other people have already done it. And it's, to me, a waste of time. It's a waste because this is not how Muslims should be spending their energy. But when do I talk about it? Only when it ends up overlapping with Islamophobia. Right? When Ahmadi spokesmen start saying that people who don't accept Ahmadis as Muslims are the cause of Islamophobia and Sunnis are the cause of Islamophobia, that's when I'll weigh in on the topic. So I'm very focused on the stuff I talk about, because if you just get into everything, then you'll waste all your energy, and two, you will lose I think you'll lose, in a sense, credibility. You can't just weigh in on everything.
Sure. Jack, that's great parting advice. We'll wrap it up right now. How can people, obviously you have your Facebook page, and that's where people, seems like where people can mostly gather your thoughts. Twitter, you're not too active, right?
My Facebook page is I think it's public or whatever, so I guess anybody can see it.
Yeah. I think I tried to friend you like a year ago. I just checked just now to see your post. Sorry. It says cancel or something. It's an option.
Really? I'm sorry, man. I'm really bad at it. I get,
sorry to put you on blast.
No.
He's reached his friend limit.
Like I said, I didn't know that.
Has he?
I didn't know how to use the thing. My wife had to show me how to use this stuff, and then I think now I have 5,000 friends.
Yeah, you should.
So I thought that if
someone,
I didn't realize that people could follow you and not be your friends.
Yes.
So I thought that I had to add everybody, and
That's
so
what
I just
do.
went up to 5,000. So I'd love to be your friend on Facebook, but
I think you're a limit.
Wait till some person with bad taste unfriends me, and then I can add you. So you should send me another request.
Yeah.
Or whatever, if you're allowed to.
Yeah, I might just cancel it and resend it. So it's but what I did do is, and the listeners out there, if you want to see what Jack's posting, just go ahead and there's an option on Facebook, following, and then you click down, it says see first. So you're one of my see first folks too. So your post will always pop up to the top of my feed.
Oh, that's so sweet, God.
Yeah. Well, Facebook's algorithm is a little sneaky, man. That thing, it'll start hiding stuff from you if you haven't posted in a while. So if Jack Brown went to Turkey for a couple weeks and hasn't posted, well, guess what? He's no longer relevant.
Yeah.
So
and we didn't talk about the meme. Yeah, I guess
I need to keep posting a bunch of garbage just to stay relevant.
Well, there was that meme where you were looking lost in that masjid too, which we won't get into right now. The one of the black hat. Remember that?
Yeah, but what does that mean?
A meme.
Yeah, but why is that a meme?
I think it's new convert not knowing where he's at or something. I think that's what it was. I think somebody made it a meme.
Oh, you didn't see it?
Anyway. No, I just posted that picture of me in the mosque. I don't know what you're talking about into a meme or something.
I think some people made it a meme. I might be able to. I'll hunt it down. I'll send it to you if I can.
Yeah, send me this thing. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but it sounds bad. It sounds like, is this insulting me or making me look stupid? Otherwise,
I don't think so. I don't know. I think I think it's poking fun at white converts. It was a white convert that made the meme, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, whatever. I'm sure it's fine. So the point is that. Yeah, then that was just because I thought it was a funny picture. Because I was wearing that Sungko hat.
Yeah, that's a Malaysian hat, right?
It didn't fit me very well, unfortunately.
Right.
Anyway, but so anyway, guys, it was really fun talking to you, and I enjoy your show, and I always listen to it.
Thanks a lot, man.
I appreciate it. Your support means a lot. You're like one of the. I remember, I was telling you last time we booked you, I was jumping up and down when you said yes.
Yeah, man.
I'm always happy to talk to you guys.
You, Joe Bradford, guys.
And I was offended. I remember I emailed you. I said, "What the heck? You guys bring all these other people on more than once. You never brought me back."
Oh my God, man. We'd love to have you on as many times as you want to.
Anytime you want to talk about something you want to talk about, you want to use our platform, you are more than welcome. Just let us know.
Well, we're always worried about bothering people.
Yeah.
So we're like, maybe they don't like us anymore.
Look, it's an honor. It's an honor that somebody wants to hear something I have to say.
Yeah.
So,
I was at DC last weekend. You know Rashid Dar?
I do know Rashid.
Yeah, so I was at Rashid Dar, and I was like, "Do you guys chill with Jack?" It's like, "Yes, we sometimes, but he's really busy." So I was like, "Yeah, we didn't like bother calling you." I was hanging out with Rashid Dar and Ismail Royer.
I'm wondering if I was here.
It was last week. It was not this past weekend, but the weekend before. The weekend before Eid. The weekend before Eid.
Oh no, I was in Turkey.
You just got back. Okay. Oh, well, inshallah. All right. Well, that being said, we'll wrap
have a
this.
good night.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man, you too.
For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. We are on Instagram. And leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes. For our special guest, Dr. Jonathan Brown, and for my co-host, Sim, this is Mahin, signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.